Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. Super honored to be here. Lots of love and respect to many people in the room, Jules, and I mean everyone that I know Toy, and so many years of appreciation to the technology and the community, from the motion graphic design to many wonderful sharing over the years. So I would like to humbly share the journey and hope to invite you very soon to something exciting that we have been working. So I'm originally from Istanbul. I'm a media artist and director, and I was very fortunate to start my journey in a city that helped me to understand not only just like digital and physical, but left and right, black and white. This idea of like the Bosphorus between two continents was truly early moments, I guess, like realizing that how incredible the nature could connect us. And I felt that one of the reasons you will see a lot of fluid dynamics is really obsession with like not only just, I guess, Bosphorus or the nature, but I am just obsessed with the water in general in life that I think I just cannot forget that day. Also, very early nerd start. My mom brought home Commodore 64. I was 8 years old, and it was that moment that like I still cannot forget the idea of like playing a game or changing a game, like or editing a game levels and being able to look at my room and how boring the wall and the ceiling and the like everything felt so like different. And then I felt that the same year when I watched the Blade Runner, that I didn't know English, but my just cousin translate. I hope he did a good job. But as a child, like we don't see like dystopia, right? As a child, we see the hope and the inspiration and joy. I felt that movie truly just was in my, I guess, memory. The idea of when a replicant says the other replicant that this memory is not yours but someone else's, that moment, that the idea of a machine, that what could a machine can do with someone else's memories, and eventually using data, I think in my practice, most likely coming from those days of like understanding. So I started using like, I guess, 3D graphics very early in my undergrad years. I was fortunate to like transform. This is like the building here you see is our school's kind of a museum at the school in Istanbul. Visual communication design department was so inspiringly allowed us to like work with typography, web design, 3D graphics almost in second and third year. 2008, I was able to graduate with this project, and it was the first time I used Cinema 4D and also start using a software called the VVVV, which is pretty much like a touch designer or MaxMSP or Pure Data, but it was an amazing learning for me to like understand the visual programming language almost like in the last year of undergrad. And by the way, that was allowed me to experiment much more than like super basic 3D graphics in real time and also like Cinema 4D. But both them together was very helpful for understanding computer graphics. And I think what was also very important to me that I felt that, as Kierkegaard said, that the more I think about the memory in that Blade Runner context, the data became an obsession also in the last year. So thanks to Peter Weibel, who was running the ZKM, the very first media art institution, 45 years ago, he believed people like us using digital technologies. I think he may be one of the first curators believe digital art was start collecting also digital art almost 45 years ago. In his class, there was this moment that, I mean, there was only 3 people, by the way, in the class, like me and a musician and a computer scientist. They were teaching us like a pure data. I don't know how much you know about the software, but it was so inspiring to see as a student be able to connect a sensor. And I was obsessed with the idea of like data painting since then. But I think overall, what I felt that was so inspiring that when we think about data, not just numbers, but think as a form of memory that can take any shape, any color, and any movement, that liberated the idea of like Newtonian physics that I think sometimes put us in these like corners of like thinking in the physical world. So I started also learning about like a lot of visual programming language such as Grasshopper, and then I learned about like so much fun with the artificial thinking of like how to use different data sets and what they could do in 3D and 2.5D world. And then also got lots of like a question about like, I guess like many artists have these deep questions. For me was, I guess, what does it really mean like to, I guess, to ask the question, what is beyond reality? But I mean, what's beyond reality question was almost like one of the hardest, I guess, as living beings that had always like these limitations of thinking. And then, by the way, this is early rejections. So 2011, it was the first time I was very much able to use a still the V4 and a real-time sound data concept, and it was a pure rejection from the from the curator because the idea was trying to put a giant frame on a building. And it was just a pure rejection that I think I still cannot forget that very early rejections could maybe sometimes turn into a form of art that could become. So since then, I'm obsessed with, I guess, noise algorithms, obsessed with like the real-time data and all form of like thinking that we cannot see, but somehow like this making invisible visible was a really, I guess, the urge to experiment with. But I found always myself in this limbo of physical virtual, and I think the more I think about where we are going as humanity, and how everything and anything we touch right now with technology is changing who we are, and becoming these new beings like we have no idea who is controlling what, I think they all come together with this idea of sense of displacement, which I think 12 years ago, when we were just witnessing like early like social media, it was just an evidence that I think the life that we create and perceive and survive as profoundly changing pre-AI. But also, I felt that this cannot be done in just one study. I felt that I need to deep dive this world, and grateful for UCLA Design Media Arts Department, where I got my second MFA degree with wonderful people, and especially Case Rias, who was my mentor, and he's my colleague, teach how to use also processing at very early age. I guess experimenting that his MIT Media Lab experiments deeply allow us to deep dive. And of course, I was always in Craigslist and finding like some hardwares and try to projection map the random places without any permit. But I think the deep obsession was when I come to this beautiful country and the city that knew home, Los Angeles. I really found that from the Blade Runner, the Frank Gehry, which we lost recently, a hero, and this beautiful building. I remember put my luggage in the dorm and just drive downtown with like a very with a big like passion to look at the building. And I learned that at 1:50 a.m. they shut down all the lights. And the dream to look at this beautiful building was actually deeply dark, and it was absolutely hard to see. And that day, I was truly like start thinking: can a building learn? Can it dream? Can it hallucinate? And that question became, of course, obviously rejection again at the DMA and at the grad studies. So I emailed Frank Gehry. I emailed LA Philharmonic, which is one of the most probably important performing arts center. I emailed the city of Los Angeles and tried to like ask, can I project this building? Of course, no response, and even like nobody even gave like any feedback. And then 1 year later, actually something happened. I mean, normally Microsoft Research every year, I think, inviting Ivy League schools, but most likely people with 7, 8 people, memorizing like an app concept, most likely people with a startup concept on the stage. My professor said, like, you know what? You should just go and don't like, just be honest and whatever your like dream that nobody cares. Perhaps there are people in the world that may just find it interesting, but maybe not the institutions. I was literally on the stage. I'm always showing this on my short that I'm, I think, getting a little bit better. And it was an amazing learning that in that stage that I was trying to talk about, like one day, the buildings can dream and hallucinate and an AI could be a part. That was a very important moment that I received from all that other 10 Ivy League school, I guess, applications. I was the only one received that year's Vision Award, which is a check that I was back in time. I was a student visa. I am not allowed to use any money, but they was allowed to be used for the department to turn into any value that is tangible, which is not a salary. Then I said, why not? It's a moment to use this award to buy 5 chairs, 5 tables, and the 5 computers. So my journey, kind of as an artist, started right there. And this is my very early Octane experiment that I just found that. This was the year I was graduating, and this was the mock-up, thanks to Frank Gehry. After the award, he sent a 3D model of the building. LA Philharmonic allowed us to like start working with them, and I'm so grateful that rejections and kind of a intolerance of new ideas turned into a form of a journey. So now I'm grateful that we are 30 people. In Los Angeles, 20 people. We can speak 15 languages and 10 countries. And the last 10 years was truly, the focus was finding this inspiring context of how to add the media art into architecture, and always try to find this physical transformation of environments, the facades, the floors, the ceilings, and environments, but always like try to fight with the idea of art can only happen in a gallery or a museum. Like find a place like a school to give inspiration or a hospital to give hope, but a places that I don't think that art was exactly expected to be experienced. But of course, design is a deep culture in the studio. Being able to embed media into architecture requires a lot of knowledge about media technologies, networking, engineering, of course, custom computation and algorithms and real-time graphics, and eventually real-time sensors and so forth. So over the 10 years, as a small team, we were able to understand how to use pretty much almost anything and everything available in the AV technologies, and work with the leaders of engineering and architectural fields and construction field to understand that what are the limitations, what are like the possibilities. So the starting was very much rejections, to be honest, from the art world, because there was a lot of like rejection about digital art. There was a lot of rejections about like, I guess, digital experiences in general early days. And what was so inspiring was, it was like finding these courageous people and institutions who have been looking for what is new, and they were looking for something not mediocre, but a place that where the institution can collaborate to generate something that they couldn't do for some reason, but find a way to donate their data ethically and find a connection with their data, information, history, and create some form of emotional connection. And that's, I think, the 10 years of pattern you can see in this short show reel. And I'm so grateful that and many institutions that has been in the journey. And I would like to today show you a couple of examples that I feel that are important in the journey. So I think 2016 February, I will go back when the Blaise Agoré-Arcas, the vice president of Google, he was doing an amazing event in Gray Area in San Francisco. And I had no idea that that event was, by the way, the first official AI art ever auctioned. And in that event, I was the only one, not Google or like not from the, I guess, engineering field. I was just an artist that's saying I like to use data. And in that event, I learned that I was pretty much ready for receiving the first artist residency program at Google. So this is Mike Taika. I'm so grateful to him. He is an amazing engineer and artist and also programmer who also released the code on the left. You can remember the Inception, which is very much early diffusion models, I guess, GAN algorithms. And he was incredibly open, and him and everyone at the AMI group allowed me and my team to learn how to use machine learning algorithms and start basic Python programming and also cloud computing. Our first project started this mission, Hallucinations. The question was, if a machine can learn, can it dream, can it hallucinate? And I think we all artists and creators like to, break things and I guess glitch and imperfections and so forth. So this was like the experiment started. I'm super inspired by Library of Babel for many years. I hope that one day every single data in the world can be free and open to anyone and everyone. And that story was somehow the starting point for the inspiration. So we received 1.7 million images from a library in Istanbul. It was one of the largest cultural archive available online and ethically to work with. What was to me a big realization, but on the left side what we see is 9 researchers for 6 years sorting this data and their metadata. And on the right side, I was able to run a Thyssen algorithm, which is a lower dimension reduction algorithm, looks at the similarities of the image context, and in just 90 minutes did something much more, I guess, profoundly readable than a human readable world. And since then, I felt that it was a very exciting moment to ask the question, but also challenge the way of interacting with machine learning algorithms. So obsessed with, again, media architecture, this was the first, I guess, immersive environment with the AI algorithm running real time. So in here, again, the BBV is used for both real time in the physical world and also Unreal Engine on the right side for real time Thyssen algorithms, which is reorganizing and lerping between the millions of possible image archives and sorting them based on similarities and so forth. And this was, I think, a super exciting moment to understand that technically, 10 years ago now, it's a very exciting time that what happened, but to me, the fundamentals of machine intelligence actually didn't change so much. So, and also, again, obsessed with fluid dynamics, and I have seen so many funny comments about that, but I just can't forget the feeling again. I felt that if there's a moment that if a machine one day can dream, I found that it doesn't need to dry. It doesn't need a thing about Newtonian physics. And I found that these particles as molecules of intelligence that was so obsessed with that. And on the left side is the first AI model I trained, 2016 December, and fed into the fluid dynamics and find that new kind of, I guess, style for last 10 years. But 10 years was really super interesting because what we focus as a studio, not just personal data, not egocentric thinking of any information, but we look for things like a space, urban, nature, culture, or heroes of creativity and humanity who I hope that we need to protect and preserve in the age of AI, that anything and everything can suddenly become referenceless. So our research is heavily focused on early days of GAN algorithms, eventual diffusion models. We work with more than 5 billion images and train more than 400 AI models. And our journey truly changed in 2017 when we met with Jensen Huang, one of also our collector and true supporter that I'll show some examples, and the NVIDIA team, and we start together to design these new algorithms that are kind of very hacky, but this allowed us to scale these neural networks in a way that I don't think anyone needs, but it was so fun to experiment with that. And they are the source of many of our artworks that are always fine-tuned and designed and curated data sets and trained models. And also, as Carl Sagan mentioned, I was so inspired that what happens if the machine intelligence applied to also sculpture making. Of course, the heroes of like art is and many people in this like a sculpting history of humanity. I felt that this may be a time for also experiment machine intelligence as like a chisel, as a form. So these are some experiments started many years ago. This is, for example, Rumi, Jalaluddin Rumi's Persian poets, Mesnevi in 19 language. It's read by 3 different AI algorithms and analyzed the similarities and the word embeddings of his vision and his, I guess, poetry. But what I felt so excited is these are actually 6-dimensional data sculptures in XYZ and RGB coordinates can be like reorganized, can be 3D printed. So I feel like if you think about maybe in like a 100 years later, if you look at back nowadays, I feel that we can reinvent the idea of sculpture through the lens of machine intelligence. But this time, maybe the quantifiable life, which is data, could be an apart. Or Mozart, entire his repertoire listened by 3 different algorithms, and so forth. So I feel like there's a lot of experiment could be also done in this field. And the other part that I felt, unfortunately, I lost my uncle from Alzheimer's. In 2016, the year I was a resident at Google, I went back to Istanbul and I learned that he was unfortunately stage 2. And I can't forget the feeling of that a machine that cannot forget, but a moment that the memories can melt was a very heavily, emotionally very powerful. And I hope nobody had these feelings. But I felt that since then, I hope art can become a medicine. And one of the things that I was very obsessed was the idea of the moment of remembering. But not breaching the privacy, but the moment of remembering. So thanks to my 2 mentors, Adam Gesder from UCSF and MIT's Rosamund Picard, I started working with both EEG datasets, fMRI, DTI, but also the biosensing data, 2016. And again, the V4 was very helpful, but on the upper right, you can see supervised very early learning classification technique using the 800 plus people's EEG data, which allows the algorithm to choose the type of memory, positive or negative. What I was really inspired by the idea of not breaching the privacy of the memory, but the idea of like connecting these data sets to a meaningful experiences could somehow follow up with an exciting form of art. One of the examples was the Venice Biennale architecture. This is a Human Connectome project data from the UCLA, Harvard, and MIT's joint consortium, an open source data of 6,000 people's emotional recordings. And that was very exciting to understand that what is the limitation of a machine learning algorithm that allows us to look at this such a unique data sets and find the similarities of emotions across many people. So meaning we can create this form of, I guess, brain hallucinations or fMRI hallucinations that are not real, but almost indistinguishable from a real DTI fMRI activities. It was a really fascinating to think that like how a machine learning algorithms can allow to sculpt the emotions instead of like something we cannot feel, we cannot touch, but maybe there's a potential that make the invisible visible and find ways of creating sculptures and immersive environments. But I guess the most powerful side was not this. After these experiments, there was a moment that inspires other communities, which is UNICEF. And we had this wonderful moment that this is an artwork called Sense of Healing. So what we see here is 5 children's positive brain data, all healed from the Lausanne Hospital. And we took that data sets and create this data sculpture, and it was auctioned at UNICEF for 1.7 million euro. And what was very amazing for our studio was to able to get that kind of a challenging data sets and hard maybe experiments and find a way to turn them into valuable experiences that is going beyond the egocentric, like maybe art experiments, but a place for where the technology can be tangible, quantifiable, and turn into a value. And a similar one happened last summer, thanks to Messi. So he inspired from this project, and he allowed us to bring for his best memory in his career, and we sold it also almost $1.9 million at Christie's and raised another significant funding for UNICEF. I guess our studio has a very much a pattern of doing as much as we can in the last 10 years and create impact like this. We also did similar for NFTs with thanks to SpaceX data, and we also raised $2.5 million for St. Jude Children's Hospital. On the other hand, I was super inspired as like coming back to this very early age of like Commodore 64 and I guess the Blade Runner. The embedding AI into architecture became a pattern of work. So the first one, I will say, probably the exciting one that I felt very challenging. 2017 summer, like we got a call from Art Tech House, friends in New York. They were looking for like an artist and a partner to build the space, but they were looking for something to create maybe a little bit challenging also for both the artist and also the institution. So we were able to collect 113 million images of New York, which was again early GAN algorithm. This was like one of the first experiments with the NVIDIA teams in both in their headquarters, but also in the Aalto University, and they were able to allow us to create this new experiment that is kind of awkward. That was, I think they mostly trained for the nature data, but it was the first time trained on the urban data. And we found out that the algorithm was reacting remarkably inspiring than the nature itself. And at the end, this was an artwork and open with 16 channel projectors, 18 channel projectors. And we, of course, designed the UV mapping, very early age, early experiments of the space and connectivity. And pretty much, I think, last 7 years, 6 years, still used by many artists and became a canvas for many other people. So this was an amazing experiment that we learned that there's so much to do when the artwork is not in a screen but in a space, and that can go beyond, I guess, our peripheral vision. There's a lot of experiment can be done. So last 9 years, we developed many installations in a similar scale in different cities and countries, and we were always trying to preserve the original physical space, but find a way to bring machine intelligence and interact with the environment. Also developed many, many experiments at the interactivity. Sometimes the interaction could be with latent space, meaning the human body can interact with the machine decisions, or in this case, weather data. But always find these interesting ways to take the physical physical presence of the space, meet with the virtual world, and find a way to bring machine intelligence in between the user and the architecture. And during the pandemic, I guess, that was a very much heavy moments for humanity and for all of us. And everything was getting canceled and postponed. And I remember that this model was trained on the Smithsonian Data Archive, 75 million flowers. The sound that also we are hearing here was early experiment with audio AI models. I clearly remember the day in the studio, nobody was in the team, team was all home, and I was still wearing that mask that we all remember, the powder smell that I remember. I was looking at our artwork, questioning, what was missing really in these machine intelligence artworks that could go beyond the pixels or the voxels, and also the audio experience. So very grateful, literally one of the best, I would say, sand molecule factor in the world, Firmenich, and our collector now emailed a message from the LinkedIn and said, Refik, have you ever worked with sand molecules? It was an amazing message in the pandemic. I said, no, I had no idea. It's so hard because sand is so powerful and so complex and requires so much research. He said, we are a 125 years family-owned company and we have 400,000 sand molecules. Perhaps something awkward could be done by art. So I'm in that a lab, which is an amazing space that has pretty much anything and everything, I guess, researchers find in nature. They have some kind of a sand molecules ever, I guess, collected. So they allowed us to train a model on their molecules and on the flower data set that I showed you. And then we come up with this awkward machine that was allowed us to create 14 unique sand molecules from some level of combination that allows us to reconstruct when the artwork in this room starts dreaming those, I guess, flora systems. We were able to generate a similar sand molecules around the same creatures that the machine could come up with hallucinations. So it was a very exciting experiment because when you're in the room, not only just seeing and hearing, but also feeling the emotion through the sand was a powerful experiment. So last 4 years, we are experimenting so much with blending both the olfactory experiments and also eventually immersive environments. So almost now 5 years actually around these experiments. And the other experiment that you maybe remember as a student was dreaming with this beautiful building to become one day canvas. So grateful that 2018, Frank Gehry and also LA Philharmonic to celebrate 100 years, they allowed us to receive entire 100 years of every single data they ever collected. So back in time, we were 9 people, and we used 42 projectors from 13 unique locations, calculate the refractions of the very hard surface, and we were able to kind of find a way to run this incredibly complex surface. I'm so grateful for this project because it was so hard for an 8, 9 people studio team to promise something for 1 year to produce. And I think for the 2 channel 4K projectors back in time was a remarkably big challenge to like handle. Also, like you can imagine, the building is 30 years old. The data from the Gehry studio was not necessarily well topologized, so lots of 3D modeling and resurfacing and finding a real-time application. It was a beautiful challenge that I love the studio to like recognize in also the performing arts. I guess that also bring us to this incredible building in Casabatio, which is a Gaudi's in Barcelona. And here the idea was, what will happen if you go maybe a little bit different path, but this time let the building feel the weather. And in this case, a live weather station that real time like pings data back to the cloud compute, and then create a kind of a living system that receives back the information and creates a real time performance on the building. So it was a really interesting experiment, and lots of Unreal Engine was also our experiments has been going. And to me, the most exciting part was to honor the Gaudi's life through UNESCO heritage data, which is 1.2 billion pixels, by the way, LiDAR scans of the surface. And we were able to create this kind of a logic between the building in real time and a kind of like a live application, but also kind of a contextualize the building as a form that can be alive and be a form of, I guess, sculpture. So this was exciting and an art form to create a standalone piece. But I think what was more inspiring and more exciting, take this concept, bring to physical world, and transform the original building. So we can maybe watch this quick ending of the performance. And to me, what was, uh, thank you very much. Thank you. I think what was really inspiring was like the idea of public art as a form of expression. And in the age of AI where the source is getting like destroyed, a place for recognizing the heroes such as Gaudi. And through the like public art that where I think people kind of like come to hug the building. It was very special than any other project we did. And we had 65,000 people, by the way. I think more than Taylor Swift concert, which is, I think, amazing data, right, to show that public art has a profound impact. Also honored with the Dernanovsky and you too. I was the opening artist for the Sphere. A fascinating challenge. I mean, eco-rectangular projection technique that we never did before. We were mostly like in a 2.5D 3D world, sure, but like reconstructing our pipelines and supporting the team on the field and running a real-time application on the Sphere was amazingly challenging and thrilling. And so grateful that this was an experiment, and we left our tools for the students, and they, I think, right now creating tons of experiments on the Sphere as well. So I think the life-changing experiment so far that I will say that happened to studio was, again, post-pandemic, there was this, all that darkness happening. There was an amazing email came from Paolo Antonelli, Michel Coe, and Case Rias, and Paolo Antonelli and Michel Coe, the creators of the MoMA. They were looking for experiments when the world is physically closed. They were looking for courageous experiments in the blockchain and experiments. So MoMA has an incredible institution that I personally fall in love when I just first time visited the United States. The first thing in New York was literally the first place was MoMA. And the building had a huge impact on my practice, and I'm pretty confident any creator somehow have an inspiration in their world that some of the artists they ever collected. The archive has 138,000 collections, which is one of the largest pioneer artwork and art world experiments, I think, collection in the world. And what makes, I think, MoMA archive very different, first of all, 8 years ago, it was on GitHub, but for some reason, they were not very well, I guess, explored and explained. And the curators and the museum team was very much open for how to use their GitHub data in a way that can become an art form. But on the other hand, what was challenging was how to communicate through these machine learning algorithms 3 years ago. I mean, this was just the large language models were coming out. And it was this very unique moment that I still didn't like diffusion models, very early ones. We were trying to find a way to make something unsupervised, which is the opposite of what's going on right now. So every single diffusion model has to be supervised through for many reasons of our language become the input. But it wasn't like a feeling a breakthrough for, as we can see, didn't happen anything around those techniques. I didn't felt that was the right choice to go with that path versus custom, maybe GAN models that is precisely and perfectly aligned with the MoMA archive. So thanks to, again, Jensen Huang and the team at NVIDIA, we just asked them, like, is it possible to get 2 DGX stations and let them, this biggest challenge for us that how to get this model never ever go and find something real in the archive, but let it dream a world or hallucinate a world that never ever go back to like the original vocabulary of the 138,000 artworks. To do that, of course, it was so weird for the curators and the art historians because we were advising what happens if there's no photography, painting, sculpture, movies and films and games, but let the machine find a latent space that we can somehow navigate. And to make it also, I think, much different than any other artwork we created, we also challenged the museum to bring a camera, a microphone, and a weather station to be able to see, hear, and feel the New York, I guess, in this case. And then we use V4 in real time and expose every single mission decisions. And during the installation, there was a dedicated screen that where people can see what exactly which chapter it is, and probably why that like speed of like nature connection is happening, why the UWeb algorithm is moving that direction that day, and what is like impact of a protest in the morning or a movement at night or a dance. So the artwork was truly living and performing real time back to the piece. But of course, to do that, there was still artists in the, I guess, creativity. So image on the left, of course, is what the machine could create, and image on the right, what me as, I guess, and studio as an artist and collectives were finding that statement about the artwork. So we put the artwork online, I guess, on physical world. It was only for 3 months. I mean, the artwork was just 3 months only exhibition. The response was absolutely not something that I felt in other projects before. Actually, I didn't know that what does it mean an artwork goes viral at MoMA, basically. So, and then slowly the impact started to change. Critics start to talk about it, and the press, and but what was really interesting to me was, I mean, it's just a very profound discussions on every single post happening. I mean, it was again 3 years ago, not different than what we are having going through these neural networks and machine intelligence, but it was in the place that where the many pioneers of movements have been declared, right, in a place that. And it was this very awkward moment that it was the first generative AI artwork, by the way, at MoMA that they were able to like exhibit. We received more than 3 million people. It was the largest audience in their 200 years of history. But I think what was amazing as an information is it was the first generative AI artwork in their collection. The message was so positive that they were recognizing as a field, as like a movement, as a form of art, as a discipline, as a medium. And that was an average 38 minutes experience from the like camera data. Even the work was get viral, it was only 42 minutes. I mean, it was just like a 4 minutes difference between a viral, post-viral world. And that was, I think, the moment that we realized with my partner, Efsun, that, I mean, we are so grateful, by the way. This was like a very similar reactions across the world, and our work has been like recognized. And so grateful that we had a chance to work with MoMA, Guggenheim last year, and Pompidou. But it was so hard to think about this medium as just done by the only, I guess, several museums. And as we all know, that digital art and the movement so far requires so many communities and so many people. I mean, for museums, it takes sometimes 2 years to decide what to exhibit. for one artwork, then it takes minimum 1 year to design and organize the exhibitions. We felt that there should be another place maybe on Earth, an institution started in the age of literally what's happening right now, and a place that where it knows the technology very well, that when you put the artwork or design or creativity, doesn't feel like an eclectic piece on the wall or a piece just standing on the just floor. So that was, I guess, dream project that Dataland started 3 years ago. So I'm happy to say that Monday morning we are receiving our, fingers crossed, fire marshal final inspection. So just a little bit maybe behind Dataland. So 24th September, we announced the building, and I guess less than 16 months, we finished the construction. It's inside a Frank Gehry building, which again, lots of love and respect, where we were able to project the Disney Hall. So that temporary parking lot became Frank Gehry's last building, and he allowed us to left an incredibly 35,000 square feet concrete shell, meaning no floor, no ceiling, no HVAC, no power, which is perfect challenge for reimagine a form of space from scratch. From network to like power to like, I guess, media fabric and audio applications and many, many cool things I will show you, hopefully. So here we have a quick teaser. So we opened our first pop-up end of last year in an exciting 1,500 people to understand the impact of an institution like this. But just to like maybe quickly summarize, for me, Dataland is like a really childish dream, I guess, but literally a place for we hope that we can truly use cutting-edge technology without very long board member meetings, but a place for really quickly understand how this medium could be applied, and in a place for truly every pioneer of their own fields can experiment with machine intelligence, and truly an open canvas for many, many creators. We did our first residency call, and we received 1,533 applications, and we will be giving with Google Arts and Culture $100,000 for 4 artists that will be able to experiment in the field. But also, when I was pretty much shocked by when the large language models just arrived, I love nature. I respect nature so much. I believe nature is the most inspiring thing we have. Nature is a living intelligence we have. I think it's a form of AI. We just don't know yet, right? But I felt that what happens if we start from scratch, this large language model concept, but in a way that instead of starting and putting anything and everything, what happens if we start with nature as an input and where it can go? So I was super inspired and so much grateful for everything that everyone you see here and every institution you see here. We kindly ask permission to use their data. We receive 500 million images ethically. It took 1.5 years to organize, to collect, to just help also each other. But fascinating to know that there's a lot of open source data and people are so happy to share with us. And I found that if we have the nature as the base, as a start point, and I hope that nobody says that this flower and tree is mine, but if the nature is there as an input for us for creativity, that we bring our own creativity later on that, perhaps it's a great solution for people who have been struggling with the current movement with AI. So on top of that, it was a little bit lazy start to just use what is existing, and we felt that we can go more than that. And last 1.5 years, we traveled 16 rainforests in the world, and we collect our own LiDAR scans and audio, I guess, binaural recordings from the sounds, and also LiDAR scans, and also very inspiring form of, I guess, image finding through the Smithsonian's Encyclopedia of Life, which is 2.2 million species archive, and try to generate an open source archive to share with everyone. We have around 5 petabytes of data to be more precise. So this data will be also the museum's, I guess, vault to be shared with the public and to be used for experiments. Also, thanks to our Google friends, they allowed us to train this model in Oregon, which is their very rare experimental compute, which is completely running on the sustainable energy, which DeepMind friends have been experimenting with this specific group of, I guess, only 200 GPUs, maybe not too much, but definitely enough to generate a lot of experiments for 2 years. And then we opened this into a platform called Living Encyclopedia. You are very welcome to experiment, open and free. So we have 4 AI models in this. We work with the Black Forest Labs. We work with our custom AI model from scratch, thanks to Jensen, I will show you. And we have a form of llama that is fine-tuned on the 49 million Nature articles. We have a new forms of Gemma, which just released that I hope everyone can see, that we use thanks to our Google Friends before it was released. So it's a very experimental platform, but it's absolutely nerd enough that I think it knows nature very, very well, even much better than I think all frontier models exist right now, because it's just so nerd about nature. So here are some results from the research. And but here, as you can see, the idea is not hallucinations. In fact, to find a ground point of reality and respect science and respect nature. It's not about, of course, replacing nature. It's about understanding, hearing, and learning nature much better. So we have also a great audio library, which at Dataland, I think around 50 million bird songs and incredible citizen science, will have a lot of experiments with the sound installation as well. Some of the early text-to-video experiments, also custom models that we were able to create on that cloud compute that I mentioned. And also, I would like to give back to thanks to Jensen 2 years ago when he released the Blackwell series, and also some heroes in the image. They were mentors for experimentation, so he allowed us to train this model from scratch. And it was a great gesture and great sponsorship for, I hope that will be helpful for many artists in the world. So that was the application, 16K by 8K version of the application, which is now going to Dataland. So at Dataland, we have 100 plus supercompute GPU in real time will be computing almost 1.2 billion pixels in real time. So that was an amazing experiment, and amazingly sleepless 2.5 years, to be more honest. And I hope in 2 months we'll be happy to show you how it looks like. Also grateful for the research. Once this research done in a way, I think we know that AI most likely means anything and everything, and I think it has to be for anyone and everyone. And I felt that our studio work didn't stop by just our own egocentric experiments, and I'm grateful for the UN research. Last year, we were recognized by the leadership as the first ethical and sustainable model that they found that traceable. So grateful that the model is our research have been recognized, and it was the first exhibition at United Nations and allowed us to display the research and behind the scenes and connect with the cultural leaders of the world. And then lastly, I would like to finish the talk with something very important that I felt that we could share. Sometimes when we talk about nature, we think about these now large nature models and machine learning algorithms and the things that we can quantify through sensors. In fact, 5 years ago, I was very honored to become one of the most unique place I ever heard in my life, in a place in Brazil, Amazonia, in Acre, a place, the home for Yawanava people. Yawanava people inspired the movie Avatar, that I don't think many of us knows that. And this family is only 1,000 people, and they can live around 120 years. And they were open their hearts and houses and homes and culture. It was incredible to live with them and incredible to learn with them, and truly and honestly ask the question, what does it really mean to live in the nature? And they've been there for thousands of years with harmony, with joy and happiness. And I was so shocked that what could be a tribe like this happy would be their dreams for. And the chief said that only 70 people can speak their language. It was a heavy hit for me that a person, a people, a mentor inspired me for the work we do. I felt that it was time to work and imagine together. And I asked, how can we join the forces? And he said, he loves AI, by the way, just to be very clearly precise. These people love AI. They are pro-technology. They protect their culture. They know how to use WhatsApp very well. And they're incredibly bright people. I had one of the deepest AI conversations in my life in the rainforest. And they were saying, we have our young ones, by the way, to go there takes significant time, and there's no shortcut, no private jet, no helicopter, 10 hours in the forest that allows you to truly understand what does it mean to be travel, I think, in the latent space of nature. And the young ones were so open-minded, and they were saying, they know the blockchain, by the way. And also, when it comes to support to these people that truly protect nature, they really doesn't get any funding from anyone, to be very honest with you. We may be seeing some auctions and fancy things, but when it comes to reality, it's actually not that. And then we just asked, like, okay, how do we do that? So this is the moment that Chief go next level. That's a rainforest, and this is probably the best data in the world from a rainforest, a weather station. Maybe you remember from other projects we did. He said that I'm happy to send data with Starlink to a project. I mean, a chief of Nishiwaka. And then he allowed us also what happens. The young Yamanava artists drove unique paintings, 12 of them, not too much, but just enough to find an AI model. They love our work. We joined the forces, and they asked us to do that, by the way, just to be sure. It's not my idea, it's their idea. And they allowed us to like take this and generate this very unique NFT collection. And we raised more than $3 million, and the chief was able to write their own smart contract, no third party, no anyone in between us. The money ethically used and shared with the incredible papers they printed on the like nature in the forest, that everyone can see what is paid for what. And at the end, the chief built the first, literally, Amazonian university and the museum. So I feel like that's what AI should help us for. Thank you very much. So I think coming back to Rumi data, the sculpture, right, that we saw, I love the Rumi's this vision. In generosity and helping, be like a flowing river. In compassion and mercy, be like the sun. In covering the faults of others, be like the night. In anger and fury, be like a dead person. In modesty and humility, be like the earth. In tolerance, be like the sea. Either appear as you are or be as you appear. Thank you very much for listening.